Welcome to a new episode of the Gaming News Canada Show. I'm your host, Steve McAllister. Yes, indeed, content is king, and content also takes on many different forms and meanings when it comes to the world of sports betting and gaming. Advertising, marketing, sports media, digital media, social media, influencers, partnerships. There's a content connection to all of them. Your humble host has had a bird's eye view to the content conundrum for more than 4 years now from a couple of perspectives. One, wearing my beret as the editor-in-chief of Gaming News Canada, and two, as a partner of the Parleh, which has worked with more than 20% of the operators in Ontario's open online gambling marketplace. On this episode, we welcome back Parleh's Director of Content Strategy and Partnerships, Kevin Kennedy, to get his thoughts on the evolution of the content game in the gambling space. Joining us after a self-imposed hiatus from the Gaming News Canada show is Kevin Kennedy. Hey, Kev, welcome back.
It's more like I was in exile from that thing, from my my lack. I'm very critical. You know me. I enjoy industry talk as much as the next guy over here. So this is very no. It's very nice to be on the show today.
Yeah, no, seriously, it's fun to have you on, and we're both kind of geeks when it comes to content, and probably from very, very different places because of our disparity in ages. So that's all I'll say on that.
Hey, Steve, there's a sliding doors moment where I end up. I was offered a job at the Rainy River Times or whatever the newspaper is up there, right out of my internship at the Hockey News. So there's a sliding doors moment where I would have been covering high school curling back in 2007, and then everything would have been different. But I ended up not wanting to go there at that time. I had just moved back to Toronto about 8 months earlier from living abroad for a few years, so I wasn't ready to move again. But things could have been a lot different if I did.
It's kind of crazy too. Like, you think 2007 isn't that long ago, and I've often talked about, and I think with you too, about that path that I've taken in my career and spending 7 years at weekly newspapers in Kincardine, Georgetown, and Etobicoke, and when you talk about Rainy River in 2007, it's not that long ago that you may have ended up taking a similar path, and really that path isn't there today in the media world that we live in and we look at.
Yeah, you're right about that. I think that I mean, Steve, I could talk about this all day. In terms of sports, at least, I really think about how something happened. So at some point, you probably know, like, when did they launch the fan? I guess it was 1430 back then. What year was that?
Yeah, it would have been, I think, late 80s, early 90s, because I did McCowan's show as a baseball writer at Canadian Press in the early 90s.
Yeah, that's right. So at that time, I mean, as a kid, then you can tell me how it felt at the time. It made a lot of sense, right? It felt like it was answering a question. Like, there's huge demand for more. Sports was growing, and it's only popping in for to have the Blue Jay games on or the Leaf games on, and that was it, really. Maybe there was Leafs talk after that, I'm not sure, but there was not this all sports radio station, and then obviously the channels followed. Now, broadcast wise, it makes a lot of sense, I think, in terms of TV and stuff like that. But I often wonder at what point, do we all arrive at something that doesn't make a lot of sense anymore? And it's like there was a point where we needed more sports coverage, and then there's a point where, like, you turn. I mean, no offense to anybody that's on there now, but you turn on the radio now, and it's very clear that they're really trying to fill time on the radio, and I think. And we have all these options with podcasts and this on-demand stuff, which is giving me, like, I'll probably still listen to 2 hours of sports talk audio every day, right? So that's a lot of consumption, but I'm definitely not relying on just whatever is happening on the radio, right? And in terms of those jobs too, like, I often just wonder, like, how much it just it feels so literal. Like we've decided that, like the idea, like now, like to me now, the idea of an all sports radio station, like it seems crazy, right? It seems like, why are we spending all day you know talking about this? It seems kind of silly when the games happen at night, and so sometimes I just think it's time to turn the page. Now I'm not talking about journalism, obviously, right? I'm talking
Right.
about opinion based, you know, talking head type of content. I'm not talking about reporting. I'm not talking about journalism. I'm not talking about that stuff, which I think, certainly still has a place in this business, especially because sports is big business, and it's big business, very meaningful to a lot of people's lives. So, I don't deny the impact or the importance of it. And it was great to see. I remember I was involved in the athletic from the very beginning, like my old business at Homestand. We were touring across the US with our pitch talk show, and I was doing research on writers, and I came across this website when they only had Chicago. So they only had
Right.
one city, and I booked a few writers from there. And then I got an email from the founders because the writer had mentioned that, and they were like, "Oh, this is cool. We want to be involved." And they wanted to promote, so we did some cross promotion with the Athletic. It was the first sort of subscriber based, like, digital platform that I'd ever heard of. And then I got to know the founders really well, and then I helped them to launch in Toronto. Like, I remember setting up their website and setting up all their socials here, and helping them hire their first crew here. So and I remember how skeptical a lot of people in media were at that time. And it was so confusing because you would hear a lot of belly aching about how no one's investing in sports writing anymore, and media companies are going down, and lack of investment here. And here are these guys launching this thing, and there's all this sort of this outcry around having to pay directly for it, and it's proven to work, right? So I think in all these things, I think sometimes we can talk so sort of high level about industries, you know succeeding or failing, when we really should be talking about innovation, and talking about, the the market will tell you if your idea is good or bad. And and so I think back to that, and I think, I have a family member. My brother Brendan is still employed at the Star,
Right.
so I've got a direct line in there to somebody who's working in that. But I think about that kind of stuff all the time. It's very long-winded answer, Steve, but you got me going on that.
No, I think that's a great soliloquy that kind of segues into why we want to get you back on the podcast, Kevin. That's around the work that Parleh has done, and this company is almost 4 years old now that you and I are a part of. And
Yeah,
we've seen an incredible evolution. And you talk about content and people, and you think of when we started this thing, and you were in charge of creating content for the business. This was a year before the Ontario market opened. This was the spring of 2021 when we started this thing, and all the
yeah,
people that we had involved during COVID shooting videos in their basement.
yeah,
And some of those people have gone on to be quite successful with other businesses. I think of Celine Tremarchi, who is working with Canuck Sports and Entertainment now, and who was just nominated for a couple of awards with one of the country music associations for
yeah,
her kind of second career hosting and doing work in the country music industry. And someone like a Sarah said, who's now working at U Sports and has taken their social media and content to another level. And even a guy like James Sharman, who was obviously an established soccer voice before he started doing some work for us, but just kind of seeing James's career continue as a broadcaster since then. I guess the first question be kind of, just looking back at those 4 years, what are some of the things that really stand out to you, and how your part of the business has evolved?
yeah. It was a really exciting time to start. We built a factory, and we had a very clear business model at the beginning, which was to create try to create a system that we could produce short form of content. And we were like very at a high quality, and we built a factory. And those all of the people that were involved at the beginning were able to get in so many reps. Like they were doing 3, 4 videos a day. And so we built up an editorial team that could support that. We built up production that could support that, and we had publishing. So we really got into we were able to get a lot of practice in, right? Especially before the markets open. And by the time the markets open, we had a defensible product that was clearly valuable to our first clients, our first clients of North Star Bets and FanDuel. And we really did good business for them because we really could what I liked about it is that we didn't need to tell our story. We didn't need to sell something. We were right out there. You could see what we could do, and you could say, "I want that." We were demonstrating that, and I think I'm really proud of that team. Like, I think it was a fun time to be able to recruit people. Um, in that moment too, it was, we're all at home. So there was a little bit, and because we could work with people across North America. So that was also very, very interesting for me. I think like one thing that I would like, I mean, not to be too, once we expanded into to long form, and I know why we expanded there. We were experimenting, the fast technology, the fast networks, um, the Plutos of the world. That was kind of big and sexy, and that was just coming around, and so we decided to move into to long form, partnering with Sports Grid and doing that. I mean, in hindsight, that was kind of a waste of time. we're we're and it goes back to like when I think back about what I know now, and I know why I did it. So I mean, it's a waste of time in terms of it not really being anything that we do now, and I know why. But we learned a lot, obviously, and some things you really have to try to get out of your system. But in hindsight, I think to myself, who who is this long form content for? Like it's asking so much of the audience. All the options that we have, all the quality options out there. It's asking a lot for someone to sit. And I remember the guys at the Athletic when they were talking about getting into podcasts, and one of the founders was like, he's like, I could read a wonderful piece, you know, in like 15 minutes, right? And that's thousands and thousands of words, right? Or I could, or we could produce a podcast that's unscripted and potentially just goes all over the place for an hour. And just in terms of him like building a product, saying I'm not really happy with that product. It's a bit, it's a bit like it's kind of asking a lot of the audience. So when we get into doing things like that just feel like you're starting with you're starting with an arbitrary problem, which is like we have an hour of content to fill. Well, we didn't have that. We created that problem, and then we had to feed the beast over and over again. And and our product was high quality, right? It was a good product. But I think about that time thinking like, those are times when a business, like all businesses, do something that in hindsight feels a bit like a vanity project. Feels like we know what that is. We've seen those shows before, and we'll refer to them. We'll say the Pat McAfee show. We'll say I'll hear it all the time. The Tim and Sid show. These shows, right? Well, if you really interrogate those shows, if you really take the time to figure out how that show got to where it is, or what were the elements that made it successful, especially the McAfee, you're gonna realize you can't do that. And so many people don't want to admit that we can't do that, whether we don't have the talent, we don't, or we're not willing to put in the time and the energy. Like people don't talk about how McAfee did like 3 years of stand-up comedy after, even while he was playing. So on top of that, being a pro athlete, doing the stand-up comedy, putting it all together, doing it on his own, getting the financing. Like these are things that are not possible for us, and I think it's a bit intoxicating, and it can get us on the because now the technology, anybody can set up a cool studio for $500, right? So it's kind of says, okay, well, like maybe I should do it. But I, just to round it off, I'm really glad we're here now because we have a narrow focus and we are the best at what we do. And in that period, we were not going to be the best at it. And frankly, I don't know anybody in Canada that is, what I struggled with is like I couldn't find anything to look up to in terms of long form in Canada too. And I couldn't see any kind of major investment. I think that there's some people doing some cool stuff, but I didn't see anything at the scale that we wanted to get to.
Hey, Kev, I would just add real quickly to that too. I mean, it feels like you're beating yourself up a little bit, and I think all the partners in Parleh have done a bit of that. But at the same time, I think you look across different stakeholders in this industry, and they've all had the same struggle. The Hockey Night in Canada took an awful lot of flack that first year for some of their partnerships with sports betting companies, and we've seen how the FanDuel relationship with TSN has evolved over time. So I think there's been awful lot of trial and error, and I think there will continue to be a lot of trial and error around how sports media and sports betting, that integration, and what's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you, just the fact that you talk about that narrow focus and knowing where, kind of what our recipe for success is now. What exactly is that for our audience?
Well, so we are clearly a service, and we've narrowed our business to, we don't do any media, now. So we don't have a media arm of our company. We're not doing that on, and so I've been able to put together a team that is super talented at capturing the storytelling that the brands that we work with want to accomplish. And so there's no one out there that's faster than us. There's no one out there that can execute on location like we can. what what I'm really interested in now, and you'll see, like, what I like to think about is like, where are we going to innovate next, right? And this is what I harass you guys on our weekly calls on as well. I said, what are the new ideas? Because we were out there on our own, 3 years ago, doing streeter content, right? We were out there with FanDuel doing streeter stuff. We're out there with this, and I remember in the World Cup, we were out there, right? And before that, obviously. And now we went down to Leicester Square for a client on Saturday, and there was like 12 groups of content creators down there. Okay, so that's good. The streeter content is great and it works, so we're all doing it now. Fine, because we can order the Rode microphones on the internet. You can use your iPhone, and you sound great and you look great. Okay, this is great, and we should continue to do that. Um, I'm right now. I am thinking a lot about scripted content. We had a great, and we're doing that with a lot of our clients. Sports Interaction is doing some cool stuff. They've got we're working on their Prime integration too on Amazon there, and that's a cool project for us. With OLG, we did a scripted. When they launched back in September at the NFL season again, they relaunched the brand on socials, and we did a cool scripted series, and I'm thinking a lot about that because I just think that the audience deserves a little bit more attention to detail. I I think that the audience deserves a little bit more entertainment, and I think that where I would like to nudge the industry here is to get honestly to get a little bit more abstract with the content that we create when we're talking about, like, again, for me, it's about respecting the audience, right, and respecting their intelligence. And the companies, the brands, especially like a brand on social has such a hard hill to climb, because social, it's not like your TV where the commercials, there's no influencers on your Hockey Night in Canada commercials, right? So you're not worried about that. It's brand, 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 brand. But on social, you're competing against individuals that are super authentic, super entertaining. They're telling great stories. And then your account is supposed to be in the feed. And you're saying, here are the lines for the Wild against the Bruins, right? And it's like what it's so boring, you know? Like like a lot of that. And I think that what brands would want to do is when someone thinks about betting, they want to choose their account, right? They want to choose that. That's what we're trying to do. And so I think that there's an opportunity here to actually, with the money that's being invested, which is not insignificant, that you can start to tell some interesting stories, and you can start to look at what the audience cares about, look at what your brand is about, and start being a little bit more, abstract in your storytelling. If you look at brands like IKEA, Airbnb, if you look at how they tell their stories, they're not going into an IKEA and filming, the different bunk beds in there, right? They're talking about a lifestyle. They're talking about, you know, they're talking about, your dream home or this beautiful kitchen. And this ties into also, I've seen actually a lot of really cool stuff on the responsible gaming side of things from these operators who have been forced to take their ambassadors and make content that is not really, directly related to marketing their
Right.
sports book, but instead marketing responsible gaming and that's where I've actually seen a lot of really cool content, because it's forced whoever's producing that content and making those choices to think a little bit more creatively, right? And to say, how do I make this? So I got Connor McDavid here, I got Jamie Foxx here, and I have to talk about gambling responsibly. And the product of those commercials have actually been really interesting because they've had to sort of create this whole story from scratch that is it's still an advertisement for that brand. So I would say those pieces of content are just as compelling as the more straightforward and traditional advertisements that we see out there.
Hey, Kev, I think we've worked, I counted 9 operators that we've worked with Ontario. It's probably more than that. I'm sure I missed a couple. I was getting ready to do this interview. But, what are the challenges and at the same time the opportunities of working with multiple operators? Not just over the 4 years, but we've worked with operators at the same time, right?
hmm it's like it's, I like to call them our sister wives, trying to keep everyone. It's not easy. I think that I mean, the way that we've built our team is that we have separate teams on the production side of things and separate talent. So the only person that sort of sits in between the multiple accounts is me. And so that maintains, I think, enough separation. And that's what my job is, honestly, to help those brands tell their stories. um, and but you can flip it around, and I don't think this is a spin job. I just think that the there is no company who has worked with more operators. So the insights that I have, the wisdom that I have. So as much as I'm not exposed to business, secrets anyway in these like businesses. I'm not we're doing marketing work, right? We're creating 1 minute commercials for these companies, and we're producing their content. So I don't. I'm not exposed to trade secrets. I'm not exposed to what's happening in the book, but I am exposed to what's working and what's not. And so that means every business that we work with gets to benefit from that, and they get to benefit from not making the same mistakes that if you're working with an agency that has not been working in this industry for the past 3-4 years, then they're going to make the same mistakes that we did at the beginning. And they're going to make the same sort of, we have so much data, and we have so much data that we're working with. And I think there's one of the big challenges that we face is a lot of times we're working with sports books that are launching brands from zero. And
Right.
so now I'm much more confident because I have the data and I have the experience to try to encourage that brand to think differently about what to do with their accounts from 0 followers to 1,000. And then after we get to 1,000, sure, let's start talking about your brand very specifically. Let's start really telling our story because we have an audience. But the way to get an audience is very different than what you do with your audience after you get them, and so I think we've definitely demonstrated an ability to do that, to take a brand from 0 to 1,000. um but back to your question, I think, yeah, I think that at first I was not as willing to sort of, I didn't really know how to talk about working with different sports books, um, with them or even publicly on my LinkedIn. And then now I realize, actually, like, this is a huge advantage to anyone that works with us. Just the sheer volume of work that we produce and the sheer learnings that we get helps everyone that we're working with. So I've changed my tune around that, and I think it's a huge advantage. I think there's so much gatekeeping around creativity too. Like, not to go on another tangent here, but like everybody, like there's like like the original, the gatekeeping around, like, since we're all like publishing on social media channels, there's the limited opportunity to be original. And so
Right.
I don't really see the point about sort of, you know hoarding, ideas, or, they're just going to get copied. The good ideas are going to get copied, and that's good. That tells you that they're good, and then you just have to come up with other ideas.
I was gonna just ask on that, Kev. Like we've had former clients who we no longer do work for, and they're using other agencies or people now, and yeah, the content's not a whole lot different than what our people are doing. I just wonder that being the case, is there what is kind of that difference maker? That Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews, if you want to use hockey parlance.
Yeah, what's the difference, like, between the different groups out there? I
Yeah, or
mean,
how do you separate yourselves? Like, what? How do how do you go to a client and say, "Hey, this is our secret sauce, or this is how we are a little bit better than our competitors."
yeah, I think that brands can be quite precious about, really, like, literally trying, being very much on brand on social media, and I think that it served them better to be, these channels are all about trends. So even if the trend doesn't serve you, or feels, silly, that's what's happening on there. So once, and we demonstrate a lot of that on our Parleh account. We're pretty fun and silly, but, um, it's really interesting how you know like, we're selling a product, right? So the stories that we tell around that product are very much like, we're all telling the same story, and you're right. So how can you just, and this is how I arrived at the scripted, side of things. I think that's a spot where you can get a little bit more innovative, and a little bit more. We already have the tools, we have the camera, and it's like there's so much stuff out there that is so clearly, um it's the minimum viable product, right? And so if you're opening up, no offense to this podcast, but we're not doing a brand. But if brands are taking a Zoom call, and, cutting it up for, social media, and expecting their audience to really think that that's special, I mean, I don't know if it is, right? But I have been seeing, there's some great accounts out there. Like, if you do an analysis on what's happening out there, y- whether or not you think it's good or not, there's some different strategies. If you look at Bet99, they have a totally different strategy than FanDuel, for example, from Sports Interaction. Those brands, those three there are doing something completely different from each other. And so the issue is sort of like, it's very subjective to talk about, who's doing better or who's doing worse. But I am happy that I am seeing things being a lot different. And I just think that, like, I think that we're so young in this industry too, that it's still developing there. But I do think, like, something to really think about with these brands is that they're in an environment with a lot of influencers, and you know and so it's just an interesting world for them to be in.
Hey, Kev, the other thing too, it seems to me, and I think we've kind of shifted, and our clients have shifted as we've seen the industry. Where at the beginning, it seemed that sports betting was a real focal point. I think that was because it was the sexy new toy, and we've seen iGaming become a lot more relevant. And in this form, iGaming, we see how pressing it was for the Ontario marketplace to include iGaming because of the struggles in the U.S., where iGaming is only legal in 6 or 7 states right now, and given the climate right now, it's real hard for those other states to bring legal iGaming on board. But I think that's been reflected in our content as well. Like we're doing far more on the iGaming side than we did when we launched 4 years ago.
Yeah, you're right. And yeah, and yeah, it's really interesting. What we work a lot with brands that have certain IP, and managing that as well. It's like, imagine there are a lot of creators out there that are literally clipping. They're gaining audience by clipping Leafs highlights, right? And we're building out our influencer program, and so I'm compiling a list of these influencers out there, like based on followers, based on engagement. And I look at it, and I can't use more than half of them, because what they do is a rights infringement, right? But it works for them. But then we bring it into the regulated environment, and so, I mean, it's a real uphill battle for these brands on social media. And that's why I really think that if I was ahead of any of these brands, I would just zoom way out and be like, okay, what what can we make that we cannot compete directly with these with these accounts on there that are these, like, Maple Leaf accounts, right? So you want a Maple Leaf fan, right? Okay, great. The Leafs are big in Toronto, obviously, and okay, and you're like, okay, what are the influencers? And all the influencers are using highlights, right?
Right.
So now, if you start making Leafs content, you're competing against those people, and you can't even use the thing that has made them popular, right? Because of the regulations. So I would try to go the other direction completely, and really try to think about a way to tell your story that is 100% unique and free from that kind of traditional sports content. And that's what's really interesting for me right now.
Hey, I want to just two quick questions to wrap up here, and
Yeah.
one is, you mentioned the Parleh social media strategy a few minutes ago, and I think we're having a lot of fun on the Instagram account right now, and it does feel like it's a testing ground. And I think Stevie Zimmerman's probably the guy that gets a lot of the props for what we're doing on that account. But just quickly, kind of the strategy behind that, and what were your marching orders of Stevie to with regards to working on that account?
Yeah, Stevie's the viral king, man. This guy, he so we wanted once we pivoted away from running our own media brands, I still wanted a place to showcase what we could do. And so what we do is, we work with trending memes, and if you look at what our content on that channel does, it's got views. The views are great, but it's shared, and it's commented on, and it's a demonstration of how to get from, like, again, we're all talking about engagement, and let's go directly. Let's be entertaining, right? So Stevie's only thing I tell him to do is like be relevant and be entertaining right now, and get this thing shared. And so he takes a few chances. I have a lot of laughs, but it's a great example of like what creative people like Stevie can do, right? And he's not holding the camera in front of his face. He's not doing this, but his work that like he publishes every day, and like that is super creative, what he's doing. It's actually very high concept stuff, right? And I'm interested in that, and it's original content. He's using existing, pieces of memes from Barack Obama to
Right.
something else, and telling a story, and he's telling a story in like 5 seconds. I think that's very, I mean, there's a lot of talent there, and I want to showcase that.
Hey, Kev, that leads to my last question, and
Yeah.
something I like to talk to about people on this show is we talk about their personal stories. I also like to pick people's brains on leadership too, and I've seen it firsthand with you over 4 years. You've had to evolve as a leader, like you said. When we came out of the gate 4 years ago, it was a real Gatling gun approach. Where I think we had maybe 40 people at one point creating content from their basements or rec rooms or backyard or whatever. And I look at our team now, and it's we're a pretty small and nimble group with Stevie and Sean McCormick and Bianca and Bruno Marola and yourself.
Yeah.
And just wonder if, for people who listen to this podcast to get some insights into leadership and innovation and being entrepreneurs and those other qualities and trying to lead a business, what lessons have you learned?
Yeah, well, I left. So I've been on my own. I've been running businesses since 2012. So now it's almost 14 years now since I left BMO. Um, yeah, yeah. Shout out to BMO, Bank of Montreal, Manulife Center. But we, you know, throughout, yeah, the team that we have now is awesome. And this is why we're able to really provide a really affordable option, for brands out there to work and to create content. We're super efficient, we're super lean, and we can really provide a great offering. I think that, in the past like 2 years, I've been thinking a lot about leadership because I don't have any like formal training in leadership. I didn't study business management, so I don't have that, but I do have 13 years of running businesses under my belt at this point, from the restaurant industry, from the live event company. We pivoted into marketing, and so yeah, like a couple of years ago, the reason why I decided to do my yoga teacher training, as well as Pilates after that. And I decided to do that. It was for personal reasons. I was developing my practice. I was pretty determined, and I saw an opportunity there that was presented to me by somebody who thought I had the real potential. I never saw myself as a yoga teacher, but actually, as I went through the training, I realized that what it was doing to me as a leader. Because oftentimes I would read all the books that you buy at the airports, the self-help books, the faster, stronger books, the how to not give a fuck books, right? And again, these are so, and the management books really didn't like sit well with me. It felt like they were sort of strategies on how to manipulate people, strategies on how to, convince people. It's all about power, right? And I feel lucky. I've never felt a real lack of power. I've never really felt like I wanted to trick somebody into giving me more power, or feeling like I need to assert that power. So it didn't really land with me. I I, I arrived at this yoga training, and it was really a good lesson in leadership, and I wanted to go further on that because I wanted to be th- like somebody who understood how to really listen, and so that my team would feel valued. We're spending so much like time at this work, and so it really resonated with me to figure out a way, if I can just, if I can be more calm, and if I can be more if I can listen better, and if I can be more present, and if I can be more just in touch with the world around me in a way that is a little bit less restless, and less sort of, I don't know, capitalistically like driven, which really can dehumanize people. We're all capitalists. We're all doing the work. That's all right. We don't need to talk about it, right? But it can really feel like, and I felt that. I felt that at BMO. I felt really dehumanized at like various workplaces, right? So, so I was once I went through that, and now I've been teaching for over a year now. I mean, it's made me such a great leader. It's made me so much more confident about the things that I do, about my relationships with people, professional and personal. And the other thing too that happened, which is interesting, is that, and I didn't realize it. My old business, kind of evaporated with COVID, right? It was a live event business,
Right.
which we folded into the Parleh, but it was really, that was a tough time, and I really missed that. I missed that energy of running a live event. And during that time, I had more kids, and so it's like going back to that seems crazy. Like I don't think I could do it now, but I do miss the energy around a live event. And now, I teach 2 classes a week, and they feel like events. I'm in front of I'm in front of a large group of people in the public, and I'm there to perform to a certain extent, at least to perform a task, which is to to lead them. And so it's been really fulfilling. And I think my main point here is like, when it comes to leadership, I think it's a good idea to again, going back to the content thing, to try to zoom out a little bit, and try to do something that takes care of yourself a little bit more than trying to read a book about how to exert power over somebody, or how to manage them, so that they perform better for you or for your company. I don't think that's a great strategy. I don't think it's ethical, but I actually don't think it really works. So I'm more interested in having really positive relationships, and then everything will take care of itself.
Yeah, and I think empathy plays a part in that as well, Kevin. Understanding that the people who work for you have personal lives, and they have relationships, and they may have kids, and
Yeah.
that's an important part. And I think the other thing is, one of the things I'm most proud of with this company is how we've allowed our people to evolve. And I look at the people that I mentioned earlier who've been with us pretty much the 4 years, and how their skill set and have evolved. And I look at the people that have come and gone with our company and having the success they have. And some of them in the media industry, some have moved on to do other things. So I think you deserve a tip, as I always say, a tip of the Sherwood, or a tap of the Sherwood, for what you've done in developing the people who are still with us, and also helping those people along the way who no longer work with Parleh.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I appreciate that.
Let's end it. Let's end it there. Kevin Kennedy is the director of content strategy and partnerships for Parleh Media Group. We keep having these kind of conversations, Kev. We're going to have to drop the local agitator handle from your X account. But
Sure.
seriously, great conversation. Long overdue. Glad we had a chance to catch up. And if you're someone in the gambling industry who likes what you've heard about Kevin, you can reach him by email at Kevin at theparleh.com. But let's not wait so long before we do this again, Kev.
All right. Sounds good, man.
That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada show. As always, you can find us on Substack, also at gamingnewscanada.ca, and on the various podcast platforms. Again, thanks to Kevin Kennedy for taking the time to be with us today, and we will see everybody again very soon.